Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum and a very good afternoon to you all. Welcome to our session titled The Inn by Maniza Naqvi in conversation with Nusrat Khawaja. I would like to introduce our speakers. First of all, Maniza Naqvi is a novelist and short story writer. Her book, A Guest in the House, is a memoir which chronicles her time at the Pioneer Book House, Karachi, and provides a lens into the history of the city. Not only that, Maniza Naqvi is the founder and CEO of the Little Book Company, a startup publisher, and ebooks digital platform for publishers, authors, and booksellers. Welcome, Maniza. It's good to have you back. Secondly, Nusrat Khawaja is a freelance writer on art and literature. She is also a practicing landscape design consultant and qualified horticulturalist. She has a bachelor's degree in cultural anthropology from Mount Holyoke College. Welcome, Nusrat. Nusrat, it's good to have you. Please give them a big hand.
Hello, Maniza. Welcome to the 13th KLF.
Thank you.
I was just thinking that the theme for this year's KLF could not have chosen a better book than The Inn, because it has separation, it has belonging, it talks of the beyond. And speaking of the beyond, this is now your fifth novel, and I found it very different in the sense that you are such an urban person and you have been so attached to the city experience. But this novel takes you away from the city into a rural setting, and that also in Virginia in the US. So could you talk about what compelled you to place the novel in that setting?
I'd like to know what you got out of it.
Oh, turning I think the forest where the inn, and I must share with the audience that the inn is where the hub of the action in this novel takes place. It is kind of a clearinghouse where people can sort of come into contact with the emotional baggage they are carrying and which they may have suppressed. So that's as much as I'm going to say about it, and I turn it back to you.
So I think I chose the rural setting of Rappahannock County in Virginia, A, because I know it, and B, I wanted to make it very clear that I know it. I really know it from the inside. I'm not an outsider. I know it. And that I can write about it down to the very insects that crawl under the ground and the soil of that country. And I use that as my, maybe that is a very self-conscious thing to do. Get it closer, okay?
Yeah,
is that better?
Yeah. I think that comes through very clearly, Maniza. Also, it's a very conversation-driven novel, and it's a very few main characters who are protagonists together in the novel, I would say. And you have given each of them a unique and individualized voice. I think that also comes out of your intimate connection with the location.
Well, thank you. I'm so relieved to hear that, because I showed this novel to my first readers about 15 years ago. And they said that, the first readers said, you know, you can't use your characters as your own bully pulpit. Each and every character can't sound like Maniza Naqvi giving a political, you know, diatribe. And this is not working. And so I went back to the drawing board and I removed myself from the characters, and I tried to hold back the rage in which I wrote this novel. And I refined the rage down to the essence of what I was trying to say. And that took me 15 years.
That's an amazingly long time. but
You might ask,
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
what were you so angry about?
Yes, I would like to ask that. Okay.
Thank you. And so I'm going to say, weren't you angry in these last 22 years? In these last 20 years? There was an endless war that has been started that has now entered a new chapter now.
Yeah.
It goes on and on and on. And in this new chapter that began in 2001, the part of the world that was so dear to me was turned into the victim. But not the victim, I thought of it as the victim. It was turned into terrorism. Everything about the part of the world that was the dearest to me was turned into an instrument of terrorism, down to the script itself of our languages.
So
Right.
I think there is a kind of change, a very successful change. I don't want to give any spoilers away, that comes in the novel, and I think you have modulated your rage and worked it into the novel very well. But before the rage, there is a very bucolic setting to which Sal, who is Salman Muhammad, a Pakistani American, and he returns to the inn year after year. I just want you to read a passage, because we have so little time, so that the audience gets a feel of what the inn was like when Salman used to go there in the good times.
Okay. In contrast, this place in Virginia was hidden naturally without walls, but instead fortified by a forest. It was designed for its outside views to be seen from an almost empty inside. Its selling point was its spacious emptiness, which allowed a spectacular view of even more empty spaces, offering possibilities of further unfettered freedom through the big picture window that looked out on the meadow and beyond it to the mountains. The main feature here was the minimally furnished, bare, spacious central room with its high vaulted ceiling and the all-purpose rustic long wooden work table with more than a dozen chairs scattered around it, on which a mess of magazines and newspapers remained strewn along with a game of Scrabble, always in progress.
Thank you, Maniza. That's really beautiful. It's also a novel that is very strongly connected with nature. But nature, I think, at least in my reading, I felt was presented in two different ways. There is nature which is organic, and that is the forest. And then there's nature which is cultivated, which is the garden. And I think you separated the two domains very cleverly to match the pattern of Sal's life. Am I correct?
That's interesting.
Because Sal comes from a background where he thinks and remembers the gardens in his uncle's house where he grew up. And yet he goes to the forest. And I think the contrast there between the organic and the cultivated is quite significant.
That's a really good catch, I think. Because this morning, as I was thinking, what are we going to talk about? I thought, I noticed something, that Sal is an outsider everywhere.
Exactly.
He goes from his village in the summers to his richer relatives in the mountains, in a place where there's a military academy, and they're wealthier people, and his parents send him there. And he's an outsider there, and he
Yes.
wants to belong there.
He wants to belong.
He
And yet
always,
he doesn't belong anywhere.
he doesn't belong anywhere.
Right. And what's very interesting is that the two characters who own and run the inn, Sylvia and Billy, and the other guest who is always there, Adrian, they have all had exposure to other countries, as has Sal. But the terms on which they have had exposure to Africa, they've been to Ethiopia, they talk of Sudan, and I think you put some of your own experience in there. Their terms of exposure are very different from Sal's exposure coming to the US as an economic migrant
Yes.
and a doctor.
Yes. They go places to save people,
Correct.
right?
Oh,
And that's what they do. They're good people.
they're very good people.
They save the bad.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think Sal, he actually, he's trying to question his own past and what may be his own errors of judgment.
Does he do that?
I think he's getting there. He may not completely succeed, but all the memories that keep flooding through in this setting, which is so disconnected from an urban setting to which he belongs, I think it allows him to touch those memories, which he has repressed for so long.
Yes. Yes. In a way, this inn, you're right. It suits him because it reminds him of home, a home where he never belonged, but aspired to belong, back there, over here.
And he returns home. And I'm not giving away a spoiler because you start with that, Maniza.
Yeah.
Would you like to read the beginning a little bit?
Well, thank you, I would.
Yeah? But not too much because...
Because
yeah.
she didn't want me to begin at the beginning, but I said I did. So,
I said, yeah.
all right. Memory concedes, like whitewash to vandals. Now, from a red brick parapet on the rooftop of his sprawling house, in parts Monticello, in others Badshai Masjid, and many impressions in between, all equally desolate, Sal, atrophied of ties, admires what he has achieved here, retrieved here. Those cupolas, pillars, and parapets, a mess of Mughal, Gothic, Andalusian, and Roman. Here, there, and there too. Further beyond, his gaze spots a car on the horizon, moving slowly in his direction. And here, within sight, in the near distance, like calligraphy against the sky, are the branches of a people, a shade across his parents' graves. A space next to them remains, waiting there for him. This point and place awaits, surely the next move. A source of comfort now, then again his gaze moves to the car in progress. He has been back for years, living here in his ancestral village. Now he surveys the surrounding fields lying fallow, readied, stretching all the way to the road in the distance. Every inch of this land known to him. Everyone here knows his father and grandfather and great-grandfather. Everyone here knows his name. No one knows him, save for this largesse and the name, he is no one. Sal now knows, after all these years, that he has left his people elsewhere. Yet here he is. He has repaired this house beyond repair, secured the land. It is his. And he has plans, Senate, and later solar, schools, sewage, water. Daniel, uncle, someday. Here he is greater in bank accounts, if not stature, than those gone before him. Here he has returned and left his own skin there. That was history. maybe even just a dream, his. No matter what it was or not, it will not leave him. He thinks about planting another tree at the site, something that flowers and fruits. She would have known exactly what kind. Wandering Jew, she had said, pointing to a plant in his apartment in DC. It's very adaptable, will thrive anywhere, like you. She said such things in simple, open ways that shimmied on the surfaces of the deep, dark pools of his habitual misgivings, yet managed to make him feel at ease, as if the ripples she created in him were actually the entrance of light. She had that glory about her, Mary Beth had, a mane of silver hair down her back, blue eyes, lips red, the mothering smell of Tide and Downy, eyes that sparkled like fireflies, flitting on the meadow on a cool Rappahannock June night, and goodness like watermelons and ice cream in July. The fireflies, the moon, the sky at dusk, the dew at dawn. Here too, in the heart of Punjab, these same companions, and memory, that dearest and fiercest of companions, dips and rises like a mirage on the horizon.
Beautiful. Thank you. It's really beautiful, like a mirage on the horizon. I just love that line so much.
Thank you.
So what did Sal mean to you, for you to create a character like Salman Muhammad?
What did he mean to me?
Like,
Well, Sal is me, obviously. I'll be clear, you know.
I wanted you to say that.
Yeah, you know, authors always mine their own experience, and I'll be, maybe it's the Gatorade that's making me say that, but in a way, you know, in those 15 years of building the characters and changing them, I wanted to take some responsibility. I couldn't let, you know, the protagonist in this novel, Sal, be a hero.
Yeah.
All the characters in my novel are despicable. They're just awful people. They're all awful. And I guess that's what I'm trying to say. We've all tolerated 20 years of endless war, haven't we? And if we look carefully at ourselves, we've all benefited from it somehow. Somehow we all have, if you really think about it.
It's a very cynical view that we've all benefited from it. We've also been harmed by it.
We've been harmed by it too, but some of us less than others. And while I talk about the white savior complex, and I'm pointing to America, we've got that in spades over here too, don't we?
Yes, definitely.
And in fact, we aren't as introspective about it. We all belong to the elite. If we are educated, if we flush, I would say we're pretty privileged here.
Speaking of means towards introspection, I found an old interview that you had given to Newsline, to Shahnaz Ramzi. And in that you had said that you considered fiction the only way to tell the truth. And it was the counterpoint to written history.
Yeah.
So you stand by that?
Absolutely. I think fiction is the only way to get to whatever that thing is that's truth. There is no one truth.
Yes.
Right?
Plurality is of the essence.
And
yeah.
Whether we say that in this philosophical, mystical way of your truth and my truth, but we are also finding out scientifically, right, that truth is a
construct.
As a
And,
construct, and it's a changing dynamic. But if there is any such thing as a truth, it can only come there through the truths of all of us, and they have to be told, right? All our stories told can get us somewhere near that truth.
And Maniza, for you to write this novel, which is not in the city, because you have written so much about the city, and especially Karachi.
That's right.
How did that feel for you? Did it come naturally?
What did you think? Did it sound natural to you?
Very, but I think you've said you know this area intimately, and you've written about the trees and the variety of undergrowth and the insects and the night sounds. All of it is in this book.
Yes.
So I didn't feel any disjunct, but I just thought it was a very different Maniza Naqvi novel, as opposed to writing about city life and families who've lived in cities all their life.
I wonder if that was actually quite self-consciously done. I was maybe trying very hard to say, don't say I'm not from here, and I have no business writing this.
Right.
Right? But if it's coming off as you're saying it is, then naturally, then I'm relieved, and I'm grateful that you've read it in that way.
And
really,
why 15 years? Can you explain?
I just couldn't get it right. I just could not get it right. And some people loved the novel, as you know, over the years they read it, and some people got really angry with me because their worldview wasn't my worldview.
Okay.
And so it upset people. And not that I was afraid of people being upset. I'm glad people are upset. But I took into consideration that I shouldn't create stick figures.
Yeah.
These people, you know, the characters have to be whole in themselves. And everybody is flawed.
Right. No, they're definitely very individualized characters. And the American characters, are they people that you knew? Or do they represent a certain point of view that you wanted to bring in?
So, you know, initially I said Sal is me, but that's not really true.
Okay.
So, you know, every writer creates characters through, you know, it's sort of like a composite of different personalities and characters, and obviously we're taking from the world around us.
Right.
अब सबके साथ तो नहीं हो सकता है कि आते हैं गैब से ये मज़ामी ख़याल में गालिब सरूर ख़ामा नवाए सरोश है, right? You do take from your own experience. But in that way, Billy and Sylvia too are composites. And what are they? As you know from the novel, Sal listens to the radio a lot.
Yeah.
And he's always listening to the news and how the news is being interpreted and presented to an American audience.
Right.
So there was a lot to take from the last 20 years of how a whole part of the world was being represented, and to build characters out of that kind of mentality.
Okay, so a lot of distillation has gone into the creation of these
Yes.
characters over a long period of time.
A long period of time.
Okay, so should we take some questions
Yes,
from
if we can.
our audience? Yes, please. The lady with the red dupatta.
Right over there.
Is there a mic?
In the back over there.
Yes, I just wanted to say that I read the book and you talked about rage on the page. It makes quite uncomfortable reading because there's such intense discussions and debates that one almost feels like one is eavesdropping, and you raise all these uncomfortable issues Muslims are facing in post 9/11 perhaps in the world. But I wanted to ask, basically I believe the book was written more than a decade ago. So the first chapter, did it always start like that, or is this something you put in later? And also the last chapter, was that there in the original, or is this also something that
I would suggest we not talk of last chapters because that will give away too much.
Wait, we
So
don't
first
have to.
chapters,
We don't
yes.
have to divulge, but we can just say whether it was a later edition or it was part of the original, very intense kind of dialogue almost.
That's a very good question, I must say. The last chapter was written just before it went to the publisher. Before my publisher, Huri Nurani, sitting right up here in front from Maktaba Danyal, one of the most wonderful publishing houses that we've had for a very long time.
Absolutely.
Who's been, just before it went to her, I suddenly sat down and said, what do I show her that's going to make her say yes? Because I meander on for a while. So I put it right there in the first chapter. And actually I did not know Huri until the pandemic started.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, there are people who've just discovered you.
I mean, I knew of her, but what I mean is we didn't know each other. So, this novel and has created a real bond here. Thank you
And
very
the
much.
first chapter,
Thank
the
you.
lady asked about the first chapter.
Oh, did I not say? So the first chapter came in just before I sent it to
The
her.
first chapter.
The
Okay.
first chapter, the one I read to
Okay.
you.
Okay.
So
That was just
yeah,
before.
yeah.
The last one you had already thought of.
And then, of course, if you're a writer, I would suggest you write your novel and, you love what you've written and you think you've done a really great job, and you have. But it sometimes helps to just pick up all your chapters and throw them up in the air. Clip them together so the papers don't, and then just pick them up at random. And you know that you can begin your story anywhere. It doesn't have to follow the sequence in which you initially wrote it. And when you do that, it cracks it wide open
Fascinating.
and lets in a lot of light.
So the writer's process. So interesting
Right.
hearing you talk about that.
So-
Any other questions? Yes, please, the lady in the black shirt.
Hello, Maniza. I'm Ruby, and we met in New York.
Yes, we did.
It's my pleasure to be here. I got your book a while ago, but I confess that I haven't read it for various reasons, but I will. I just wanted to ask you, I can't comment on the book, but I wanted to ask about your own creative process that you described, which took about 15 years. Your muse, from what I gathered you saying, was the rage that you felt. And that rage came out in expression that you put there. I'm just wondering, when you finished that last chapter, that book, was there a catharsis? Did you feel your rage allay a bit? Did you feel lighter or not? Just as a personal experience, because rage is a strong word, Maniza.
I know.
You know.
Thank you.
So,
Let Maniza
yes,
answer.
I
That's
So-
a good question.
Um, That's such a great question. So let me say that the propelling reason for why I started writing this novel, this particular novel, was let me tell you now. And here's what I have to say. And I was angry. That wasn't my muse. No, rage was not my muse. I didn't realize that. And then when I finally started to sit down, crack it wide open, let the light in, then the muse walked in as well. And it was take a look at everything with sympathy. And take a look at everything. Find the spot where you want to bring in love. You've got to write from a place of love.
So you have assuaged your rage
Nope.
through the, no? That remains
Not for a
parallel
moment.
stream?
But find where the love is.
Okay.
And when you do that, then the rage will become more effective. Then you'll know how to harness it. Then you'll be able to speak in ways in which people won't be deaf to what you're saying, won't be blind to what you're writing. Right? They will be able to understand it because the muse has walked in. Right?
Because your character also experiences rage, and I think he makes bad judgments because of the rage.
He is so despicable,
So,
unforgivable. Exactly.
so he has to find his way out of it through love as well, right?
Do you think he does?
I'm not saying a word on that. People have to read the book. So, do we have any more questions? Can you say it in the mics for the recording?
Just, I mean, you've written a lot of books. How do you go about structuring your work, and what's your working day like? I mean, do you write every day a certain number of words, or is it the stream of consciousness when you're inspired, or how do you work?
So, how to say that? Because, you know,
Oh, right, sorry.
I did hear the question. I did hear the question. So I do not go into a room and lock the door behind me. I do not spend the day saying I'm going to write 500 words. I do not look at writing as a way of earning my living. I write. I write wherever the muse appears. It could be on a bus, it could be at a restaurant, when I do not have a pen on me and I say, I will remember this sentence, and then I promptly forget it. I write whenever the emotion takes over. And then it is something I cannot control. I have to go and get it written, because I can barely think. Those of my friends here, they can probably already see it in my eyes when I've left the room. You know, I'm talking and I'm going, but actually I'm writing something in my head, and then I'm going to put it down on paper as soon as I have, the space to do that. That's how I write, and it takes a while. And then sometimes it flows. You know, I can write for hours and hours, and the best periods of writing are when I'm painting as well as writing and cooking, and everything's happening all at the same time, and usually I'm infatuated with someone or the other, and that's when it's all coming together and I'm writing. And like I said, you write. I know you have a novel. Sometimes it helps to throw it all up in the air, as I said earlier, and pick it up wherever. Don't be afraid of that. Don't be afraid of that. Wherever you pick it up from, it'll be an interesting way to start the story. Thank you.
That's
And when you're ready with your novel, you come to me and I will publish you at the Little Book Company, Pakistan's first e-book platform.
Oh, there you are. You've got a publisher as well. I think it's always interesting to see the writer's process and have them talk a little bit about it because it's so different for each writer. So we can have one more question? No?
We're running
Okay.
over time.
So I think,
There's just one more question.
okay,
Can you-
one last question. Please make it a very short question. The gentleman in the black shirt.
No, the lady in the green, right here.
Maniza, throughout your talk, you talked about showing your written words before you published it to various people. Why did you need this validation at every stage of this novel?
I didn't.
mean,
what-
did you have the confidence of your words and your story?
No, she couldn't hear the. She couldn't hear the.
I just wondered, throughout your the process when you are describing it from the very beginning, you said that you showed it to various people and you took in their opinion in your writing. So why did you need this self-validation at every point as a writer? I mean, why did you give away your creative process to be judged by others?
I know I shouldn't have done that.
But that's as candid as an author can get. Thank you,
Yeah.
Maniza. It's been a joy to be in conversation with you. Thank you, everybody, for being here.
Nusrat and Maniza, thank you for such an enlightening session. Thank you for being with us today. Ladies, please give them a big hand.
The mic's up.
Our next session commences at 2:15. Thank you.